Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. I am your host, Sarah Parker, and today I am bringing you a solo episode. Now, I have done a solo episode previously talking about some of the topics that I'm going to talk about today, but essentially, what I want to do is revisit what I spoke about in my current mindset, so 2025. And in the previous episode, stepping away from victim mentality, I spoke in a deep nature about some of the things that I've been through in my life, but I want to actually speak a little bit more about those things and add some more context. Also, if you are a new listener to the podcast, it's an absolute honor to be here and to serve you. And I want to continue resonating, building a bond with you guys, and expressing how important my role in your life is by being able to be vulnerable, being able to talk about the things that I've come through. I hope that it adds substance to when I say never give up. I actually have that tattooed. Never give up, guys. And at times, absolutely, we want to give up. We don't want to be here anymore. There's times in my life where I've just wanted the noise to stop. I've just wanted to not have to deal with life. And that goes outside of challenges within bodybuilding. That goes into my childhood, into my teenage years, and into my adult life. A sentiment I want to read out before I delve into our podcast today summarizes some of the things that I'm going to talk about. And it also gives you that preface to if this is an episode that you don't want to listen to for any reason, then you can make that decision and perhaps you revisit this episode when you're in a place where you would be open to listening, because it does involve topics like sexual abuse as a young adult, trying to take my own life, drug and alcohol abuse, the things that right now might be something that you don't want to hear about. And I completely respect that. I absolutely do. Because if you are facing anything of that nature, it may feel too raw right now. On the flip side of that, it may help you to resonate with someone that has been through potentially similar scenarios. And it's never a case of trying to, talk about my story and gain pity or continue to be a victim as I was for many, many years of my life. It's the complete opposite. I want to bring hope to the podcast. I want to bring raw, honest conversations, and that is true to me. So the sentiment I actually wrote out was, all I have is my pride, but what happens when that is stripped away and you have nothing? I spent the majority of my life as a victim, sexually abused as a teenager and into my adult life, homeless at the age of 14 with nothing apart from the clothes on my back. As I walked the streets with no shoes, shelter, or food, I was a victim. I faced violence, gun crime, and my own struggles with drugs and alcohol. Abuse continued in a different form as I spent 11 years in a relationship that looked like the perfect life from the outside. I've never spoken about one of the most humbling experiences of my life when I tried to take my own life. As I bled, the pain of life seemed to fade. That day, an angel must have been looking over me because now I am ready to tell my whole story. And this in itself, guys, it is it's a it's hard to put words to when I think back to a lot of those things that I have faced. And I know I've referenced this before. There was something inside me that knew I was meant for something. And when I found bodybuilding, when I wasn't placing at shows, when I wasn't good enough, I was not competitive, and that's just how it was. I kept thinking, I'm sure bodybuilding is my thing. I'm sure I have found my passion in life. I'm sure that I'm meant to pursue this path. But as we know, when you do face not placing, when you know it's going to take years and years to build a physique that's competitive, at times you could easily end this pursuit. Because how do you see what could happen in years and years to come. Because we often think about the right now, the here and now. And when you are not placing, when you're being judged and your feedback is you need to improve everywhere, it's very, very hard. And what I now realize is that I was meant to be the voice of bodybuilding. I was meant to start the podcast. I was meant to build a community. I was meant to be hope for some of you guys. I was meant to be the person that I knew I could become, but I didn't know it in that context. I just had this feeling inside me that I was meant for something, and I just knew, I knew. And all of the things that I've been through, and I've just said there must have been an angel watching over me. There was moments where I would, as I say, want the noise to stop, but I kept going. I kept going because there was this, I guess, courage inside. You have to keep going. You have to keep going. And when I say I've spent the majority of my life as a victim, I absolutely have. And it's not until around 3, 4 years ago where I took ownership for that. And my self-awareness was you are living as a victim. And consequently, you are going from one scenario to another scenario to another scenario as a victim. I was almost letting out this energy to bring relationships into my life, scenarios in my life where I could essentially continue being a victim because that's all I knew from very early on. And my first experience that I can recall of feeling like a victim, feeling backed against the wall as a child, I got asked if I had been sexually abused by my own father. Now, he left when I was 5 and actually got taken through the courts because it got found out that he was a paedophile and that he abused my stepsister. So he was married before he met my mum and he abused her. He sexually abused her. When my mum found out and it all came out, he left. So from the age of 5, it was me, my mum, my younger brother, and my granddad stepped up to essentially be my dad. And even mentioning granddad's name, it's he was my everything. My granddad was my everything. And he stepped up, he stepped up to be there and be my father and my best friend. And he taught me a lot. He really, really did. And part of my continuation to keep going is to do him proud and be the person that he raised and gave his life over to. And that's the person I have become and I will continue to become because becoming a journey of life, it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. We continue to build and become. We can always be better. And when I got sat down and me and my brother and my mum and I got asked this, I didn't recall anything happening to me. I didn't recall that my dad had sexually abused me, that had touched me, any of those things of that nature. But the social worker continued to probe, ask in different ways, asking different questions of, was there anything? Did he touch you? Did he, were you on his lap and you felt anything? And this type of stuff. And I felt like, what the hell's going on here? Why am I being asked these questions? I don't know how to answer this. And I believe I was around the age of 8, so very young. And when that happened, my mum actually vocalized that when I was a baby, a very small baby, that she came into the room one day and my dad had been in the room with me. I was laying on the bed as a small baby, a child, and there was a huge stain next to me on the bed. And she said that it did look like my dad had, you know, I'll just say come, ejaculated, however you want to say it. And she didn't pursue anything with that. She sort of just brushed over it in her own mind. I guess probably a protection mechanism because she wouldn't want to believe something like that had happened. Why would you? And I absolutely do not blame my mum for that in any way, shape, or form. But obviously, hearing that was difficult because I don't know. And I believe most of us will probably share that uncertainty is a difficult thing. You know, when you're facing anything in life, if you have uncertainty, it's quite hard to be able to find rationale because you can't control what's going on because it's uncertain. And I've thought about this. Would I want to know if he had inappropriately touched me or done anything? Would I really want to know? And the answer is probably no, to be fair. And I say probably because, potentially things could change in the future. And I'm not someone that's going to give absolutes. But right now, at this point in my life, and I've felt like this since then, I don't want to know. And if anything, I want to shut myself away from that. For sure, you could say that that's not dealing with something, that's trying to brush something under the carpet. But what is that going to do to serve me if I know my own dad inappropriately touched me or did anything of that nature to me? I don't believe that's going to serve me in any which way, shape, or form. And later down the line, if we fast forward, when my dad passed, I got asked to visit the hospital, and this was, early adulthood. And I was on the fence, and I decided to go and visit him. And they said, "Is there anything you want to ask him? Is there anything you want to say?" Now he was in and out of consciousness. He was on his deathbed, dying from cancer, extremely skinny, a shadow of a man, essentially. And I said, "No, I don't want to. Nothing needs to be said here. I'm happy that I visited to be able to say my goodbye." And everyone in the room was, there was family members, nurses, etc. He's been waiting to see you. You're his princess. Will you hold his hand? And you know what I did? Because I decided that's okay. That's okay to do that. And there was still other family members to visit him. There was still people that were coming to see him say goodbye. And I actually left because I'm qualified in sports massage, if you haven't picked that up already on the podcast. And I had a client. So I said, if I can, I can come back. I can come back to say the goodbyes or just sit in the room. And I got a phone call on my way home. I'd left, it was about 5, 10 minutes after, and he'd actually passed. And they said to me that he was hanging on for you to visit because he wanted to know that you were able to be in a room with him and to say goodbye in his own way. Now, as I say, he was in and out of consciousness. So, you know, in my mind, it was like, did he even know I was there? But we do hear this. We hear this that sometimes people have to see someone or feel someone there, feel their presence before they can pass. And he passed. And I felt okay about it because I knew it was going to happen. However, I did the massage. I went to the cinema that night with my partner at the time, and my scarf brushed my cheek and my face. And I burst out into tears, and it was an uncontrollable. I collapsed. I couldn't stop crying, and that's what I feel like. It was a soul type feeling, and I immediately needed to be with my mum. So my partner drove me to my mum's, and I just sobbed in her arms for hours, and then it stopped, and it was gone, and that was it. And since that moment, I haven't thought I wish I'd asked him anything. I don't wish I formed a relationship with him. I don't feel anything towards that. But that gives you some context as to where my life started when I started to feel like life wasn't very kind to me. Life was going to offer me challenges, and I didn't know if I was strong enough. But the challenges that kept coming, I know I am strong enough. I am a survivor. I absolutely am. And no matter what comes in the future, I won't give up. I will not. And through through that time of being a child with my mum being a single parent, it wasn't easy in the respect of seeing her, work herself literally to the bone. Now my mum has arthritis. She's got various things from working 8 jobs, putting food on the table, not fucking sitting down. She did everything in her power to work hard to keep the home. The home that we had was actually in quite a posh area in Bognor Regis, and it was well above what my mum could afford. But she was hell bent on keeping our family home. When my dad left and everything got signed over to her, she worked her fucking ass off to pay that mortgage and do everything in her power for me and my brother. However, it meant we weren't around her a lot. She'd be working, and a lot of the time we would fend for ourselves. Now, seeing my mum work to this nature, seeing what my mum poured into life to keep things going, meant that I didn't go to her with certain things because I didn't want to bother her. So, although I had my mum there, I had my granddad, a lot of the time I would try and deal with things myself. I would try and be older than I was. I would try and be brave. And I feel like the first sort of instances where this started to become more and more real, obviously you go through school, you go through the different grades, was when I started to get bullied at school. Now, I'm sure a lot of you listening have probably experienced some level of bullying because it is something that is incredibly common, and I'm going to play it straight, it's horrendous when you are picked apart essentially for, who you are, how you look, maybe, how you communicate, whatever that may be. And I was called goofy, my hair was horrible and frizzy. I was threatened in the playground. I was scared. I was alone. I mentioned this on the last podcast. I would eat my lunch in the toilets on my own because I was scared. I got threatened that they'd break my arms, all of these things. And this was just being bullied literally because I didn't know how to be brave enough to push back against bullies. I now know sitting here that if anyone was to talk detrimentally to me, I can stand my own. I'm absolutely not scared of that. And even if it meant I was in a really bad scenario and it turned into something that was not ideal, I will not back down. And when I'm backed against the wall, I will remain true. I absolutely will. I do not appease people. I do not suppress how I feel. And if you know me, particularly if you're in my close circle, you know I'm not a yes man. You know I won't just say things to make you feel good because that's not my role in your life. And I know you guys appreciate that. And part of being bullied, I didn't tell anyone about it because as I say, I didn't want to tell my mum. I didn't want her to worry. But part of that continued to feed a want to be liked, to have protection, to find people that could look after me and, protect me from all of this stuff that was coming my way. And the thing is, I can sit here now and say, oh, people said they break my legs, they were picking on me, all of this stuff. And, when I say it right now, you know, just talking, does it carry weight? Right? It's like, oh, it's just school ground chatter. It's just things that happen when you're growing up. But guys, at the time when you're in your young teenage years and you're being threatened, you're being told that people that are older than you are going to break your arms, break your legs, to not go near them, to not, if they come across you, you've got hell to pay. It's fucking shit scary. It really, really is. Because I was literally this person that they were labeling, right? Goofy, frizzy hair. I fucking had no confidence. I wanted to be brave. I wanted to try and be brave. And I did that by not telling anyone. I didn't do that by sticking up for myself. I took the shit. I got laughed at. I got ridiculed constantly, constantly. But nobody knew because I kept it to myself. And I couldn't wait to be able to move to upper school, which was essentially across the field, because I would hopefully be away from these bullies. It was a bigger, the school setup was bigger. I could go into a different year group. Maybe I could make more friends and I could find a sort of tribe, as it were. Maybe I could be protected. So when I moved over to upper school, and this was, I was young, really, really young still. And, you're absolutely trying to find yourself. You don't really, well, you might have, guys, but I feel a lot of us don't really know who we are. What do we want to be? Who are we at these young ages, 13, 14, 15? Who the hell are we? And I was absolutely soul searching to find people that liked me. And luckily, I did have a friendship group. But I also started to get into the realms of mixing with the wrong people. So essentially, my first boyfriend, he was a year above me and he was part of a family. And if you've had this in your area where you grew up, he was part of a family that was untouchable. They were known in the area. You do not fuck with that family. And his family were notorious for violence, drugs, alcohol. You didn't fuck with them. They wouldn't think twice if you tried to cross them about biting your fucking nose off. Like I'm talking this is a different realm, guys. Being around people that do not give two shits about the law, about other people, when there's drugs and alcohol involved, it's a whole nother world. It absolutely is. But I was nobody. So being seen by someone, my first boyfriend, as I was infatuated straight away. I was like, this is my protector. This is my first love. This is the person I want to be with for the rest of my life. He's gonna save me. I don't have to get bullied again because if anyone fucks with me, they will have him to deal with and consequently his family. I'm part of this untouchable ring here. So did I do things with drugs, with alcohol, that were against my upbringing, that were against what my mum's wishes were? Yes, I absolutely did. I was addicted to weed and hash from a very young age, which was starting around when I was 14. There was alcohol. There was multiple occasions where I would essentially get so drunk that I didn't even know who the fucking hell I was. One occasion, one of my friends in our friendship group, and they all started to mix with my boyfriend at the time and his friends, and we sort of all mixed together. One of my friends, her dad got us a load of alcohol, and it was actually the night that I was planning to lose my virginity to my boyfriend at the time, and I was so shit scared of that. Like I didn't feel ready to have sex at that age. I really didn't, and I was so scared. Perhaps, there was part of what happened with my dad in the background there. I don't know. And I drank a whole litre of vodka, ended up in hospital, having my stomach pumped. I was naked on the hospital bed, fucked out my face, and as I say, got my stomach pumped, etc. There was multiple examples of a lot of drink, a lot of, drugs, all of these things. And what I started to find was that through drugs and alcohol, it would take me away even further from feeling like a victim. It would make me feel alive. You know, I'd essentially found a way to become someone in a group of people. And as I say, can we say it's not the right group of people? The influence there is, not ideal, as it were. However, it made me feel like I was someone. It gave me purpose. And if you've been there, you'll understand when I say that. If you haven't been there, that might sound a little bit crazy, but it did. I was a cool kid. I was rebelling. I didn't give a shit about what my mum thought. I'm fucking cool. I'm not going to be a victim anymore. Okay, cool. I'm Sarah. People like me. And when I look back, do people actually like you in those scenarios? It's hard to know. So at this time, I'd be going out, I'd go home stoned, and my mum had moved on to another partner, so my stepdad, and they were they were happy most of the time, but there was certain things that, he we found out that he was addicted to gambling. He had a son and a daughter that didn't necessarily get on well with me and my brother and my mum all the time. It was sort of a mixed narrative of family that had come together. They were very badly behaved at times. They were younger than us. Their mum wasn't very nice. Like it was confusing, should we say. And when I used to go home sometimes stoned, I would remember walking home so paranoid on my own. Every little, if you heard a twig snap or you heard anything, I'd be thinking, shit, someone's there. Ah. And I remember this really, really well. I know the route that I walk home. And I get home, my mum would like open my eyes, look if they were bloodshot, look if I was stoned. My stepdad would do the same. They'd accuse me, and I'd be like, no, 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 I'm not, and try and, say I'm not. But they knew, and my mum knew I was going down this path essentially. Now, while all this was going on, I was essentially, still getting grades at school, still okay at everything, still going to school. I would bunk lessons. I would be put in isolation because I was acting up. I was just being a shit, basically. I was the jester in the classroom a lot of the time, still trying to be liked by what I would say at school it's like the posh kids, the pretty girls, the pretty boys. Like I would do things that would make them laugh, and consequently, I want to do that more because then I could be liked by them. I could be liked by my friendship group, and I'm seeking this approval from all different angles. And as I say, while this was going on, I was living at home. My stepdad was there, my mum, my brother. Now, one night and I haven't spoken about this before. One night I was in the top bunk of the bunk beds, and my stepdad came home drunk. And it was late, I'd been sleeping, and he came home, and we had the bunk beds because of when his children would stay over. So it was just me, and I was on the top bunk. And he woke me up, sort of put his hand on my shoulder, and I woke up and he was like, I've come to say goodnight. And I could smell the alcohol in his breath. And it was that sort of jovial, drunk type vibe. And it was like, okay, so I've seen him drunk before. My mum doesn't drink, she's never drunk. I'm around drugs and alcohol anyway with, my partner at the time, my boyfriend at the time's family. And it was like, okay. He said, I want to kiss goodnight. And we were quite close, right? Like, I liked him. I was happy that mum had someone, she'd moved on. And he actually put his tongue in my mouth. And I remember it vividly. The smell of the alcohol, his tongue going in my mouth, and it freaked me the fuck out. And I just pulled back and said goodnight and turned around and he went. And that's what happened. And again, back into the protection mode of not wanting to tell my mum, not wanting to spoil their marriage, maybe an element of not wanting to be, you know, exposed and would my mum believe me, etc. So I kept it quiet. Now, consequently, for around 4, 6 weeks, every time we walked past each other on the corridor, like when you go upstairs and you've got your bedrooms, on that corridor, I'd take a wide berth. I would absolutely try and not cross paths with him. I would deviate from talking to him if I could, all of these things. And I distanced myself. Now, after this time, 4 or 6 weeks, mum pulled me in the bedroom one day and she was like, "What's going on between you and your stepdad?" And I was like, "It doesn't matter." And she was like, "What's going on? Something's happened." So I sat on the bed and I said, "What happened?" So mum marched me downstairs to him and said, "Sarah's just said that you tried to kiss her, that you put your tongue in her mouth. Did you do that?" And he said, "Nope, that didn't happen. There's crosswires here. That definitely didn't happen." And mum was like, "I knew that wouldn't have happened. You must have been dreaming. You must have got confused." Again, I'm a victim because my own mum doesn't believe me. And again, I don't blame my mum for that. She didn't want to believe it was true. To be honest, nor did I. I didn't want that to happen to me. I absolutely did not. And again, it was brushed over. And I continued with the drugs and alcohol. I continued to expose myself to that, to feel the high, the freedom, because it takes you away from the noise. It takes you away from the shit. It takes you away from being in that environment. And I remember we then went on to have an argument one day, and I swore at my mum, I swore at my stepdad, and that's not something I've been brought up to do. And it was around me, going down this wrong path. And I remember my stepdad put me in the bath, turned the cold shower on. My mum put soap in my mouth. "You do not swear at us." I bit the soap, I spat it out at them, and I was just like, "Leave me the fuck alone," etc., etc. Bearing in mind I'm soaking wet, this has happened. When I could get out the bathroom, I ran downstairs, opened the back door, ran out the back door, closed the gate. My mum and stepdad came behind me and locked the gate. And that's the moment I became homeless. I I walked away because the gate had been locked and I left that life in my mind. Now it was just me in the world. I had no shoes on. I literally had the clothes on my back. And I walked and I walked and I walked. And I remember there was a light rain and I walked across a field that's near where I lived and I could feel the wet grass on my feet. I could feel that the world was big and I was just a dot. I was alone with nothing. And I didn't want to go home again. In my mind, that was not my home anymore. But that meant I didn't have a home. I just had myself. And in that moment, I walked away from my family, my brother, my granddad, and I became a missing person at the age of 14. I went to my boyfriend's house and said, "Can I live there? Can I stay there?" And his dad said, "No, you can't live here. You can't stay here because we grow weed here. We've got drugs here. We're known by the police. I don't want you bringing trouble to my house." So he'd still sneak me in. Sometimes I'd still see him. I couldn't obviously go to school because then I'd be found. And I didn't want to be found. So I didn't go to school for 6 weeks. I was a missing person and I was homeless for 6 weeks. During that time, I I realized a lot. And every time I see a homeless person, every time I see someone outside, maybe with a cardboard box as a blanket, right? People begging, people off their face on drugs, alcohol. I feel that because what led them to being there? And we can all often judge, right? You can look at someone on the street and go, fucking this, fucking that. It's disgusting. Oh, look, they're smoking. Oh, look, they're drinking. Well, I thought they had no money. I thought they were homeless. I'm going to give you a dose of context here. I met a homeless guy not long ago, and he was outside the co-op playing the guitar, and he was under the influence. A very, very nice guy. And he said, when people give me food, I'm grateful, but the only thing that I can count on getting free is drugs and alcohol from my friends because they give that to me for free. But what that means is I don't have an appetite. So I get given free food and I keep it. And if I can eat it, I will. But I would rather use the drugs and alcohol so I don't have to feel. So I don't have to deal with what this feels like to be homeless. And that gave me context as well because when you think, oh, look, they're having a fag, but they're homeless and they're asking for my money. How about that for a bit of context, guys? Because what I realized during that time is that I had the same. People would share a joint with me, people would give me cocaine, people would give me speed, people would give me fags, rollies, people would give me alcohol because it's almost part of this mechanism when you're in this sort of tribe mentality. You share the drugs and the alcohol. They knew I was homeless, they knew I didn't have any money, but they want me to be part of the gang, be part of what's going on in the scenario. But that meant I didn't have to find money for food. I could live on, something like speed. You have zero appetite, guys. If you try and eat, you're going to be fucking, well, you just can't eat. You can't eat. And it's true because I would have rather got a packet of fags than food. I'm going to play it straight. I absolutely am. And during that time when I couldn't stay anywhere, I couldn't stay at my ex-boyfriend's. I couldn't go home. I couldn't see my granddad. I couldn't find shelter. I would walk the streets. I would walk the streets in the dark, in the cold, in the rain. I would hide down alleys. I would hide in trees, anywhere, because of course, being 14, being a young girl, what's the likelihood that something could happen? It's definitely there, guys. The streets of Bognor and probably a lot of towns across the world, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of drunk people, men, women, drugs, etc. And when you're knocking in these circles, when you're part of these circles, you never know. Trust me. I see people now that are absolutely off their nut on drugs. And when you're part of circles where you have people in those circles like that, trust me, you don't know if you're safe. If someone is off their tits on drugs or alcohol, you don't know if you're going to be okay because the mood, the scenario can switch just like that. And I've been in plenty scenarios where I've had to fucking evacuate and go back into being on my own, walking the streets. But there got points where I was so cold, I was so alone. I wanted to feel warmth of a bed, of a house. And I would befriend people. And there was a few different guys over the time. Obviously, I had a boyfriend, but there was, this is where I started to realize that people's intentions aren't always what your intentions are. When I say befriend people, I thought I was making friends. There was several different males there that I made friends with, and I could hopefully stay at their house. And there was one guy, and I stayed at his. He said, "You can stay at mine. I know you're with your boyfriend. I know him. It's okay. You can stay around mine." And I remember getting in that bed, laying in the bed, feeling the the duvet, the warmth. He let me have a shower, and I was like, I feel warmth. I feel comfort. This is unknown to me right now. Unfortunately, in the night, he did try and touch me. He did try it on with me. Again, someone has facilitated my trust. Again, I've been touched and I've had to leave because I wasn't asking for that. I didn't want that. I just wanted the warmth of that bed. I just wanted to feel safe, comfortable, that I could have a night's sleep. But that was taken away. And this happened with a few different guys. And it was just horrible. It was horrible because I had nowhere to go. And at times when I could go to my boyfriend's house, if his dad wasn't home, or there was one example where his dad came home when I was there and I had to fucking hide behind a curtain. There's lots of different scenarios, but the police would continue to go around there and say, "Have you seen Sarah? She's a missing person, she's a child." And they'd say no, and he wouldn't let me in the house. And it was just wild. I remember once I was walking in Bognor and I saw my granddad, and I just wanted to go and give him a hug. I wanted to tell him I was okay. There was so many times where I could have just knocked on his door, but that would mean I'd have to face up to going back to my old life, and I didn't want to. And when I think back to that, you know, when you are in these circles, when you are with these people that are robbing, that are stealing, that are under the influence most of the time, it's wild. It really is. It doesn't really feel like it was my life, if you know what I mean, when I think about my life right now. But it is part of my life. And, there'd be this constant worry because, as I say, it's unpredictable being around certain people. I remember I got accused of stealing someone's weed, and I don't, I don't, I'm an honest person, right? And I don't want to be in a scenario where I'm going to be accused of stealing someone's weed, so consequently, I would not do that. But when people are desperate, when people are addicted to drugs, if they misplace something, if they think someone's stolen something, let me tell you, that's coming at you. Where's my fucking drugs? Turned out they were misplaced, but I got the brunt of it. I'm the homeless person. I'm the one with no money. I'm the weaker party here. Must have been you that stole the drugs, and it wasn't. But that caused a massive rift in my friendship group because I was scared to be around that person. It was a female. She was fucking handy and she was crazy when it came to, she would fucking lose her shit. I'd seen her fight, and all of these things. So I couldn't go in this certain area in Bognor anymore. I was scared that I'd come across her. I was fucking so scared because you're dealing with people much like my boyfriend's family that do not give a shit about the law, that do not give a shit. If something's in their mind, it had been tainted in their mind, there'd been a discussion, even though the drugs were found, it still felt like I was wrongfully accused and then seen as I'm not part of that circle. Because if I was part of that circle, they wouldn't think I'd do that. They would trust me. And I was so scared to be around her ever again that I had to avoid. And that's what I did to try and protect myself. And we were out one day, and this at this point, it's 6 weeks of being a missing person. And my boyfriend at the time broke a wing mirror. We used to piss around doing stuff, and he would do stuff like that. Anyway, someone had seen it out of their house. The police had got called, and they'd been given our descriptions. So we're then walking around doing our thing. There was a group of us, and they came over and they say, "You match the descriptions of these people. You just broke a wing mirror. What are your names?" My boyfriend at the time says my name. I come up on the screen. You're a missing person. We're taking you home. Fuck me, guys. That's it. I've been caught. I've been caught and I'm being taken home. They put me in the back of the police car and I was saying, my mum hit me. I had soap put in my mouth. You can't leave me with her. I can't go back there. She's gonna hit me. She's gonna da 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 da. And they were like, we've got to take you home. And in that moment, I didn't feel safe in the hands of the law. I told them she'd hit me. I told them I didn't feel safe going home. And they said, there's nowhere else for you to go. You've got to go home. They dropped me off, said to my mum what my concerns were. She said, no, 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 none of that's going to happen. And they left. That also gave me context for, yes, my mum had put me in the shower. They put soap in my mouth. That's the only time she'd hit me. But imagine, guys, imagine if I was a child that had been abused several times, if I'd been hit several times, if I wasn't safe with my mum and the police had just sent me home. Gives me thought processes about when we hear about child abuse, when we hear about children being abused by their parents and dying. Is there the safety there that could be? I don't know. And that's not something that I'm going to get into here. It's not me trying to do anything other than say that that did give me a lot of context. And it does worry me. It does. And from there, I then had to be home and back in that environment, which I didn't want to be in. So essentially, I lived under, I feel like it was almost under duress because I didn't want to be there. But I went back to school. I was able to finish my GCSEs and I just put up and shut up basically because that was the best thing to do. I had a family support worker that was helping me at school because of being in and out of isolation, coming to school stoned, these types of things. And she's someone that supported me more than anyone while I was a missing person. I mentioned this on the last podcast. We kept on contact on my little Nokia phone, and she met me once a week. She wasn't allowed to. She was told not to, and it had to be a secret. But she said to me, I would rather meet with you once a week and know you're safe and be at the end of the phone and lose my job if I need to because you're important to me. One of my guardian angels in life because I still had someone there. We met in McDonald's in Bognor Regis once a week and she didn't abuse my trust. One of the only people in that time that didn't abuse my trust that I could trust with my whole life. And I'll always be grateful to her. I always will. Because she risked her whole job for me. But she wanted to know I was okay. So I finished school. Now at this point, I actually got the opportunity to essentially move in with my boyfriend at the time and his mum. So I could move away from my home and I could move in with him. And that's what I wanted to do. I was still in love with him, besotted with him, however you want to say that. So from a fairly young age, I was able to move in with him. And that was a blessing and a curse, my people. A blessing and a curse. Previous to this, before moving in with him, the last, portion of time at school, there was still a lot of bunking, isolation, getting stoned, getting drunk, cocaine, all of these things. And there was a lot of occasions where I was exposed to a lot of violence. His dad was an alcoholic. He was a fucking brick shithouse. I remember times when we'd be in bed, me and my boyfriend, we'd be cuddled up. We'd hear him come home at like 2 a.m. And if he came home at that hour, generally speaking, he'd be pissed. We'd hear him come up the stairs, the stomps coming upstairs. My boyfriend at the time would hug onto me tight. We'd pretend to be asleep. We'd hide under the duvet and he'd come in the bedroom. Get up, get up. I want to fucking fight. Get up now. And he'd come over to bed. He'd pull the duvet off. Get out the fucking bed. We're having a boxing fight with my partner at the time. And he'd have to get up and his dad would start sparring with him in the fucking bedroom, punching him. He'd ask him to punch him back. Come on, son, fucking give it to me. We're having a fucking boxing fight in the bedroom. I'm in the bed shitting myself. My boyfriend at the time's crying because he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to fight his dad. But consequently, because he opened up to me, because he told me he loved me, I felt like I was the only person in his life to see the real him. And no matter what happened in that relationship, I felt like he loves me, he lets me see the real him, I'll stay by and stick by him. There was multiple times where he'd be messaging other girls. The one time before I lost my virginity to him, I caught him having sex with another girl, and he told me when I caught him that he needed to have sex with her because men need to have sex. Men need to have sex. So you won't lose your virginity to me because you're too scared. So I need to have sex with other girls. But when you're ready, we can then have sex and I can fulfill my needs. You know, this type of stuff. Wild, wild stuff. There'd be several scenarios where his dad would come into the bedroom when we were around there for lunch break, when we bunked, you know, me and my female friends, my boyfriend partner at the time, his friends, like the little gang of us. And I remember once his dad came in and it was like lunchtime, pissed. And he was like, right, who's gonna fucking snog me? And we're literally all sitting there shitting ourselves. When I say it's a brick shit house, a handy brick shit house that has absolutely no worries with fucking doing whatever he wants to do, it's fucking so scary. And he put his tongue in one of the boys, which was my partner's cousin, mouth. He snogged him. Bearing in mind, he's like 15 at the time. He was crying, and we all had to sit there and watch as he snogged his nephew in front of us. You know, this type of stuff. I remember the boys would sit round and have a dartboard and they'd all wank off and try and come to hit the dartboard. Like they'd do games like that. They'd sit and watch porn and essentially, I want to say make us sit there and watch it as well. I actually have personal issues with porn. Apart from being forced to watch it, I've never watched it on my own accord. It's not my vibe. It's not something I would do because of that, being exposed to that. There was a lot of this like sexual pressure. Now, this translated into the rest of his family. So, his uncle, his dad's brother, his brother, occasions with both of them for myself that were scary. His brother locked me in a room one day, got his penis out, cornered me in the room and said, you will suck my penis. You will suck my dick, suck my dick. Now, he was basically a smaller version of the dad. I've seen him fucking smash the shit out of someone's head on top of them on the floor. I've seen him bite someone's ear off. I've seen him bite someone's nose off. I've seen him hit his other half. Lots of stuff. And I was locked in the room with him with his knob out and he was telling me to suck it. Thankfully, my partner at the time came home. Thankfully, my boyfriend at the time came home. Disrupted it, and I didn't have to do the act. His uncle, very similar to his dad. When we got introduced to him, we were like, oh, he's a really nice guy. Like he had a nice car, older guy, obviously. He'd let me sit in his car, bearing in mind I'm still around the age of 14, 15. And he gave me his number. He said, Sarah, if you ever need to talk to me, I'm at the end of the phone. This started turning into messages, him telling me I'm beautiful, him telling me that we can share a life together. He's going to look after me. I'm still with his nephew. I don't know if any of you guys have had it, but when you're a younger female and or male, sometimes an older person, for some reason, we can be drawn to that for maybe safety, security. They know themselves more, that type of stuff. And, I started to get these sort of feelings towards him that were really strange because I had this like love with my boyfriend, but I was like, he's got his own car, he's got money, he's not scared of anyone. Like, it was really strange. And he'd like say, "Should we meet up? Is anyone home? We can meet up at the family house." And nothing happened with him, thankfully. But I feel like it was potentially a level of grooming, although nothing sexual at all happened, which was something I'm very thankful for. And all of these things were happening, during the ages of sort of 14 to 16. And when we moved in with his mum and dad had split up. We lived in a flat and she was a massive stoner. And we would sit and smoke weed, we'd still do coke, speed, stuff like that as well. She was like, she sort of wanted to be one of us. It was a bit of a strange dynamic when I think back to it, but she would have men round. She'd have different men round a lot of the time. She'd sleep with them. We would hear her having sex with them. It made me feel really uncomfortable. I just I don't like it. I don't like that type of stuff. And I got to the point where, so coming into sort of 16, 17, where I was able to get a job and enroll in college. At this point, I was heavily addicted to weed. I couldn't go out the house without having a toke on a joint. I couldn't, I don't even feel like I could think. I don't even feel like I could do anything without having a joint. And from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, all I'd think about is I need a joint. I want my weed. I want my weed. When I got into speed, that also is something that I started to lean on more as well. Now, bearing in mind, I've started college. I'm getting, the college benefit. I don't know if you still get that now. I think it's called EMA. And, not much money. I start as a glass collector at a pub, start to earn a bit of money. Now, at this time, my boyfriend, still the same boyfriend at the time, didn't have a job. He was on benefits. So we had no money. We had to try and give his mum some money towards the rent. And I remember so many times where I would go into Iceland and I'd have literally like 10 quid. And that was for like a week's shop, right? And I'd find a way to, get enough food. But then sometimes I'd go home after a shift at the pub and they would have eaten all the food because they got the munchies because they were stoned. Then I'd lean on the speed more because you don't need to eat. And I was just in this vicious cycle. He would sleep all day. I would go out and work. It was no life. It was no life. There was one occasion where his friends were around and me, him, and one of his friends slept in a bed together. And I actually woke up in the night and again, the sexual abuse continues. I woke up to his friend and we were sort of, it was, I mean, I think back and I think, why were we doing that anyway? But we were like spooning each other. So there was the three of us and I was in the middle for whatever reason. And his friend's fingers were up my vagina. And I woke up terrified and I didn't know what to do. And I laid there frozen. What do I do? This is his best friend. He's laying in front of me. His best friend's behind me. His friend's fingers are inside me. What do I do? So I decided to wiggle around. He moved and then we went back to sleep. The next day I told my boyfriend. It resulted in a massive punch up. He got him to leave. But again, another example of this twisted sort of life that was occurring with the drugs, with the alcohol. What was reasonable? What was normal? I don't fucking know. But another example of I'm just being taken advantage of. I'm a victim again. Why do people feel like they can do these things to me? Why? Because that's all I'm worth. I'm worth nothing. I'm just a female that people feel that they can abuse. And that's what it felt like, guys. And this is where it got to the point where, and I'd self-harmed bits, over that time. I found this, I found this release from, and I don't know if this was a normal thing at the time, but people would do it, young people in my sort of school and stuff, where you just scratch yourself till it bleeds. And I would scratch myself, and some people did it like 100 times or whatever. Um, I'd scratch myself till it bleeds, and that would give me relief. The pain, this hurts, this feels good. I'm gonna keep doing this. And that ventured into cutting myself. And I realized one day that when you cut yourself in, is that horizontal? That if you don't cut yourself in the direction of the veins, you're just going to cut yourself and bleed. If you can directly cut yourself through a vein, you have more chance of potentially ending your life. And one day it got so bad, and we were in the flat, and I took myself into the bathroom, closed the door, and I had the knife that I used to use, the little blade, and it was time for me to say goodbye to this world. It was time for me to go. Because I could stop the noise. I could stop the abuse. So I cut myself deep in the direction of the vein, and the blood just kept coming. It was going everywhere in the bathroom. And all I was doing was sitting there, letting it bleed, praying that no one would realize I was in the bathroom, that no one would bother me, that this was it. This was me. I was ready to say goodbye. And the blood kept coming, and it felt so good. It felt so good to bleed and feel that change physiologically, to feel like you're slipping away. And then there was a knock on the door. And I remember thinking, how long does it take to die? How long does it take? I'm ready. But the knocking got louder. So I decided to take my life back and stop the bleeding and hide the bleeding. I was able to talk, and I said, I won't be long. I've just come on my period. I was frantically cleaning this blood up. It was still bleeding. I was using a towel, and I managed to clear the mess and be able to cover it up. I so wanted it to end. But like I said at the start, I believe, and I now know why I'm here. I'm meant to be here. I'm meant to be with you guys. I know that. I'd still cut myself from time to time after this, but I didn't go down that route again. I still got through college dependent on weed. I'd hunt the bedroom every morning before leaving for college and have even a toke on a joint. I'd burn the fucking roach because there might be a bit of weed. I'd search under the bed just to find that tiny bit of bud or tiny bit of hash. I remember during this time every morning I'd cough my guts up, black tar would come out. I just felt disgusting, but I couldn't stop smoking the weed. I couldn't stop trying to take the noise away. But trying to take my own life, I didn't have the courage to do that again because although it was relief, it fucking hurt. And I couldn't go back there. I couldn't do that again. I couldn't do that again. But the scars stay. All of the scars stay. But you can survive these things because I am living proof of that. And I'm proud of myself that I could still go to college. I could still do that. I could still work and earn money. I could hide that I was a victim, although I was a victim. That relationship came to an end when I was around late 17, 18, because he told me he didn't want to be with me anymore. And he essentially moved on with another girl, a 14-year-old. If he hadn't have told me brutally, I do not want you anymore, I do not love you, leave me alone, I don't know where that path would have gone. Really, it was one of the best things that had ever happened to me. But it didn't stop the obsession. I would sit outside his house. I'd stare up at his bedroom window. It didn't unleash a good side to me. It it didn't. But then I finally got the gist when I saw them together multiple times that he didn't want me anymore. He'd moved on. I did worry about that 14-year-old, but I couldn't do anything about that. So I was forced to move back with my mum, with my tail between my legs. I moved back in with my mum. One of the best things that could happen because we reincarnated our relationship. I could forgive, she could forgive my bad behavior, and we reconciled our relationship. She took me in. Through those years from 18 to 21, the alcohol and the drugs stayed. I spent a lot of time soul searching. I actually spent a huge amount of time with some of my cousins in London. So obviously I'm from Bognor Regis, but I got into a spell of essentially going up there to see them, go clubbing with them. Obviously being 18, old enough to go clubbing. It was great, a new life starting, a new chapter. Yes, there was drugs and alcohol, but it was more of a party scene. It was more like felt like fun, I felt like I was becoming a bit of an adult. My cousins are older than me. I was like, this is really cool. I'm going out in London. It's a different chapter of my life. That came with its own challenges. There was a lot more, shall I say, compared to down south, there was a lot of violence, there was gun crime, there was bad people. And my cousin got mixed up with a guy. She actually got pregnant with him. And he was not a nice person. Really not a nice person. He would hit her in front of me. He would shout at her. It was just horrible. But she was in a similar scenario to me, and I could see it because I'd been there where she loved him and she wanted to be with him. So she would excuse the behavior. And we would go clubbing and then arrange to meet him, and he'd want to know where she was and everything else. And I remember one time we went to meet him in a car, and he was pulling her in the car, and she was like, I don't want to come with you tonight. And he was like, you will fucking come with me. You will have sex with me. Get in the fucking car. And he was pulling her. So I decided to intervene. She couldn't believe it because most of her friends fucked off. I'm trying to pull her out the car. There's someone in the driving seat trying to drive off while he's putting her in the car. He got out a gun and pointed it to my face. Let her fucking go. She's mine. A gun to the side of my face. With that, he pulled her so hard that he managed to get her in the car, shut the door, and they sped off. I don't know what happened that night. In my mind, my cousin was going to get raped. She got taken that night, and we didn't ever talk about it. And there was instances like that where we'd get caught up in clubs, in social scenarios, and the men would expect things from us. I remember vividly going clubbing with them once, and I was sat at a bar, and I had my drink, and a guy started talking to me, so I turned to talk to him, turned back, had some of my drink. Within a very short space of time, I literally fell from the bar stool onto the floor. It later transpired I'd been date raped. My intuition took me from being on the floor, like literally, I couldn't even fucking hit, like it was wild. My first instinct was get to the female toilets so that the man can't come in. If you've been date raped, which you don't know at the time, I'd had two drinks, right? Like I wasn't. And I remember I passed out in that toilet, and my cousin and her friends came and found me a couple of hours later, round round the toilet, round the actual stem of the toilet, like off this planet. And I'd been date raped. Not raped, but as in the substance. Things like this were happening all the time to us. Again, I'm a victim. And through those ages of 18 to 21, I would go clubbing, again, try and fit in. I remember going clubbing in Bognor once, and I got offered MDMA. First time, and I took it. And if you guys have tried MDMA, you'll know what comes with that. That first time we can often remember. I thought I'd felt freedom and a high from other drugs, but this was next level. I felt this surgence of love, of acceptance, of peace, of freedom. It was like, whoa, is this real life? Is this available? Is this reality? What have I been living? Like, what? I want more of this. And that opened the path to, raving and different things. What I found was, and what I'd always, think about here is the raving. I've never been in danger at a rave. I've come across people that have, been having a bad high. Well, there has been the odd piss people, but generally speaking, you go back the fuck up. I'm the protector of the group when we go raving, but generally speaking, it's like fuck off. We're here to rave and have a good time, and people back up. And what I say about the rave scene is, the MDMA, the ecstasy, everyone shares love, and it's a very exhilarating space. And I don't really rave now. Like I haven't been to a rave for a while. But there's definitely, a feeling that comes from something like MDMA. It's not something I'd ever, say I'm never going to do that again. I just haven't. For me, if I'm going to go to a rave, if I'm going to take something like ecstasy or MDMA, I'll be honest here. I have to have a calling and an intention to do that. I won't go into it too much, but for me, there needs to be a reason why I would do that. And, you might be listening and you haven't taken recreational drugs. And I'm a coach, right? I'm a podcast host. I'm a competitive bodybuilder. I've won titles. I've pursued bodybuilding. Trust me when I say there is a hell of a lot of recreational drug use in the bodybuilding world. So please, again, try not to judge this because we all have choices to make. We all have choices. And I leave it at that because I don't want to go into those rabbit holes. But what I will say is that was a new era of my life, a very enjoyable one. And then I met who turned out to be my husband. And he was from a very, very well brought up family, financially stable, big house. I actually got a job at a leisure centre after becoming a personal trainer. So I did beauty, massage, then personal training at college. And I met him at the leisure centre I got a job at. And he was obsessed with me, which was like the shoe on the other foot compared to the previous relationship. And I'd had like little relationships in between and stuff, but nothing of any substance. And only one night stand, may I add. So it's not my vibe really. Um, that experience was fine, like it was a bit of fun, but it's not really how I roll, as it were. And I was brought into this security, but this came with like the jealousy was wild. The controlling nature was wild. He would check my phone. He actually got a job at the leisure centre as well, so he could watch me. I wasn't allowed to go out. He'd want to stay with me all the time. As I say, he would check my phone. And this became a period of my life where the abuse changed and it changed to emotional abuse. And I spoke a lot about this on my last podcast. And I understand I've shared quite a lot there of things that are of a vulnerable and deep nature. And what I will say is going into this relationship, what I compromised and my trade-off was safety, security, warmth, shelter with someone that I didn't really like. I wasn't sexually attracted to him, but what is the trade-off for me? So I either have someone that's jealous, controlling, checks my phone, it was like I was in a prison, but I'm stable. I've got a shelter. I've got someone that loves me, that will never cheat on me, that will never leave me, is obsessed with me. Or I have someone that's going to cheat on me, abuse, all of these things, and no real safety. So this was an upgrade in my mind, right? But I spent those first 2, 3 years with continuous nausea, acid reflux. I couldn't sleep. I'd get, terrible GI issues. I was worried all the time that he'd be see me talking to a guy in the gym when I'm working, right? That then we'd go home and he'd, shout at me, have a go at me. It just went on and on and on. But this trade-off in my mind was the best trade-off it could be. And I didn't tell anyone that this was happening. My mum had an idea because when she'd spend time around, of course, us, she could see it. But I feel like she wanted me to, be happy, and I was telling her I was happy. That relationship went on for 11 years. We got married, a house, 2 dogs. Wild because I made the trade-off. I made that trade-off. But I became a housewife. I became someone that didn't really socialize. I didn't really, have the confidence outside of that. I worked obviously to get the mortgage, etc., pay for the dogs and pay my way. I've always paid my way. Always, always. And COVID hit. And from when we got married, so the last 3 years of our relationship, we didn't have sex, we didn't kiss on the lips, nothing. He actually started to game a lot, and in COVID that exacerbated, and he would do like 18-hour stints on his computer game with other people in the headphones and all of this. And I realized more and more that I was worth more. Bearing in mind during this 11 years was when I pursued bodybuilding. And I've referenced this before on the pod multiple times. Even when I lifted the Miss Universe title in Mexico, the pinnacle of my career as a bodybuilder, I still had to go back that night and get in a bed with him. I was still that person that was a victim. Yeah, accolades feel good at the time, guys. But if you've got stuff going on in your personal life, it's never going to feel as good as if that's in line as well. And that's why I talk about it. And in COVID actually saved me because I would take the dogs out for a walk, I'd do the housework, I'd do baking, I'd do all this stuff. It got to the point where I'd make his 3 meals a day, I'd take them over to him on the computer. He had a toilet right there and a snack drawer, and he didn't move from that space for 18 hours, 13 hours, 12 hours into the night. No sex, no nothing. And I'm like, the COVID just, I'm like, I'm a housewife. I'm like in my early 30s. What the fuck am I doing? What the fuck am I doing? And that gave me the opportunity for 2 years of COVID to build up the courage and the strength to leave. To leave my house, my security, my dogs, my husband. And this is one of my sayings. It gave me the opportunity to open that front door and see colour in the trees for the first time. That gave me the opportunity to take my scars, to take everything that built into who I am and be free. I could be free from abuse, both sexual, violent, and also emotional. I could take on the world on my own. I could be the person I am sitting here today. And I could survive. I could be a survivor. Because no one's going to take that colour from the trees from me again. I tell you that. Nobody. Nothing. No money. No security is worth your happiness and your soul. Nothing. Because the power I felt that day, the day I opened that door and made that decision, was a power for me to move forward. And there was absolutely tests from the universe to go back to that life, right? I spent a couple of weeks at my mum. She was away for a week of that on holiday, and I lived at her house on my own. I was like, oh my God, I'm an independent woman. I've got a life. I only have to think about myself. This is great. During those weeks of, being away from the house, and when I went back to say, this is definitely my final decision, he cried, he wrote me a note, he told me he'd do anything, he'd give me money, da 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 da. His dad messaged me saying, I'll give you 10 grand to stay and I'll pay for you both to go on holiday. No money is worth it, guys. No money was worth my happiness. Fuck that. No. The universe can test me and I'm here for it. But I passed all of the tests. The divorce was quite quick, but he took the dogs from me. I was not able to get to see the dogs again, my babies. And the only option would be to steal them. And I'm not prepared to do that to my babies, to take them from their home. They don't know what's going on. And he wasn't a bad father to them. They were safe, they had their environment, but they had to say goodbye to their mum. And that's not their fault. And that will sit with me. But I know I did the best thing for them because they're safe and they're in their environment. Another trade-off that I needed to make. And I needed to do that for them because it was the right decision. I couldn't face any more drama and pain. I'd already had multiple things going on with him and his family, trying to get me to go back there. And then it turned, he said to me, even in 10 years, if you come back to me, I'll be here waiting for you. 4 weeks after I'd left, he actually set up shop with another gamer, a female, and they're still together now. So, lots of words, guys. But when he met her, it became nasty. I'd get the abusive messages, phone calls, da 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 da. And I just needed it to stop and to start my new life. And I sit here now and I go back to what I started the podcast with. All I have is my pride, but what happens when that is stripped away and you have nothing? What happens is, guys, that you still have that pride. And when you have that pride, you rebuild it. You rebuild it by being honest and true to you. You rebuild it by remembering where you came from and who you are and who you want to become and what that looks like for you. How do you build the life that aligns with you? Because the pride is stripped away when you're abused, when you're backed up against the wall and you have nothing. But you can build it like bricks, like building a house. You can rebuild your life at any time, guys. Whether you're 15, 35, or 75, you can. It takes courage, takes ownership, and it takes stepping away from being a victim. And I want to thank you for listening to my story today. I really do. It's brought out a lot of things that and this, I haven't planned this podcast. This has just, I've gone through those events. It's authentically just come together. And of course, at times I've been upset. There's certain things that have hit me. And it's very, very cathartic for me to go through these and revisit these things to see how that feels. And what it validates for me right now, guys, is that I'm free. And I thank you all once again.